What is up, everybody? Clint Lamb with Cover Crimson, sitting here with Jimmy Stein. Jimmy, it's Sunday. It's the Lord's Day, and we got a lot that we're trying to exercise patience, and we're being tested, man. Cam Coleman ends up committing to Texas. Not a surprise whatsoever, but I think, and I guess Hollywood Smothers also committing to Texas or flipping to Texas. That isn't a huge shock compared to where things were trending, but these are two. I don't think Cam Coleman was ever super realistic. Granted, I think Alabama was more in it than people think, but just because you're more in it doesn't mean that you're in the driver's seat or really in a position to actually make it happen. But just what are your initial reaction, and kind of thoughts on both of these two pieces of news?
Yeah, I think any negative reaction to Cam Coleman or people that weren't being realistic or understanding what that situation was. I do think Alabama had a real shot. I know that because Cam Coleman came to Alabama during a very hectic time. 130 programs would be interested in signing him. He only visited 4, and Alabama was one of the 4. So Alabama met with him, made their pitch. In the end, he did exactly what I personally predicted he would do minute number 1 when he entered the portal, and that signed with Texas. A lot of people think it's about money. I think money is important, as it is with everyone, but I don't think Texas's offer is going to be appreciably more than A&M or Alabama or Auburn. I wouldn't be surprised to learn down the road, by the way, that Auburn's offer wasn't the biggest of all of them, or Texas Tech, who's been famously offering a whole lot here. But I think Cam Coleman ultimately chose Texas because of Arch Manning, Steve Sarkisian, and just a confidence that Texas could put him in the first round, playing with a quarterback like that. And Alabama had unproven quarterbacks, though obviously talented guys, but not proven, like Arch is, and particularly the way Arch was playing down the stretch. That to me is not even – I didn't even raise an eyebrow. I don't even consider it negative at all. Alabama's in pretty decent shape at starting wide receiver anyway. Hollywood Smothers is different. I get the outcry. I get people being upset at that. You could argue maybe the staff didn't handle that as well as possibly could have. That's certainly an argument to make in this situation. And this is something that's more, I think, a direct reflection on things not going as well for Alabama in the portal as Alabama fans had hoped. I think Hollywood Smothers is a better example of that than Cam Coleman. I just hope people realize that at running back, Alabama still has E.J. Crowell and A.K. Deere in terms of what I think are big-time talents. They also returned Daniel Hill and Kevin Riley, who are veteran players in this league. I don't think Alabama's situation at starting receiver and the running back room is terrible. There's other spots on the team I'm actually more worried about than running back and wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm that's where I'm at. You got to be able to call it what it is. The fact that they had the kind of struggles that they did as far as getting certain guys on campus, the fact that you get a commitment from a guy like Hollywood Smothers, and that's obviously going to add an element that you were lacking in 2025. And then seeing him flip to Texas, and then you got other guys. Obviously, this Cam Coleman situation, it's like all the guys at the top that fans would really get excited about, you seemingly have missed on all of them for one reason or another. Some of it is understandable. Some of it is not as justifiable. Now, granted, I think Hollywood Smothers, in the way that it's been handled, whether it be him or through an agent, sometimes it's the agent that's kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes, and Texas has a lot of money, and when they come in with an enticing offer and, all those things, he could have been talked into it. It might have not been him, but I think some of what was reported as far as what he was telling the different media members, whether it be from the Texas side or the Alabama side, and just kind of not being completely forthcoming. I don't think that's a great look, and that's a decision that he made. Now, granted, it could have been somebody telling him to do it behind the scenes, but if that's what they're telling you to do, then I wouldn't trust that person, because that's remembered. Granted, I'm not sitting here saying, some NFL team someday is going to know that he did that and they're not going to trust him. But I'm saying sometimes these relationships end up mattering more than you think. And so I think Alabama fans, while it comes right on the heels of what happened with Cam Coleman, I think they're a lot more okay with Hollywood Smothers than they are with Cam Coleman. And what I mean by that is just they're okay with him leaving. You know, I think they're probably more upset with how it went down and the fact that he was committed. From that angle, they're more upset about Hollywood Smothers. But based off of personality and decisions and things like that, I don't think anybody, you know, a lot of people probably didn't want him around. Now, granted, right now, where does Alabama turn? You know, like you said, at wide receiver, I still think they're in really good shape. And they did bring in Noah Rogers, the former Ohio State and NC State wide receiver. I think, you know, he's a former 5-star recruit. I think he's a good player. I definitely think he fits that X billing that you look for. And he provides more of an established, I say established. He is established. He's been around for a while. He's experienced, hadn't been ultra productive, whether it be at Ohio State or NC State, but he does bring that experience element where if you mix him with guys like CD Morgan and Derek Meadows, you're getting that size element, you know, with both experience and talent. I think from that standpoint, you know, it does make some level of sense.
It's almost like Noah Rogers to me is almost more important than Cam Coleman. I know that sounds silly to people, but let me explain. You know, at wide receiver right now, if you're like going to project starters for next fall, you certainly start with Latsier Brooks in the slot and Ryan Williams outside. And right then and there, regardless of Ryan's struggles, which I think are going to be a thing of the past, frankly, I think he's going to have a monster junior season. I really believe that. You got two spots that you feel really good about. And the third spot could go to a Rico Scott, who I think everyone should be excited about. It could go to Derek Meadows, who we should be excited about. Or it could even go to CD Morgan, who I think everyone should be really excited about. I mean, you know, this is a guy that I've compared to even the likes of Julio Jones. And I'm not even really stretching things there. I mean, he reminds me of Julio a little bit. I don't expect him to have Julio's freshman year. But I'm just saying, you've got 5 quality names of guys that could either start the game or be in the first rotation. What you need at wide receiver is depth. Now, Cam Coleman would be nice, but when you're already paying Ryan quite a bit and you're already paying Latsier Brooks quite a bit, and you've got 3 other guys capable of being first team, seems to me that spending $2 million, for instance, on a wide receiver when you're already pretty good there doesn't make much sense. Now, what's the need at wide receiver? More than 5. They need more than 5 guys. They only have 5, period. You've got to add depth to the room. Adding Noah Rogers, who's not going to cost $2 million to compete for first-team rotation spots and be the 6th receiver on the team. To me, that's a lot, but that means a lot because that money that you're overspending on another wide receiver starter should be better spent, in my opinion, at the line of scrimmage where it's critically needed. So in my mind, you could argue that a player like Noah Rogers, who, you know, again, perceived as having big time talent out of high school, it hasn't happened yet, but he has been good. I think sometimes we have a tendency, Clint, when guys are 5 stars or expectations are super high and the player only ends up being good, we're disappointed. Instead of being able to say, hey, you know who's pretty good? Noah Rogers. Because we're disappointed. We expected so much that being good is a disappointment. Being good should never be a disappointment, especially at this game at this level. I think Noah Rogers was NC State's 3rd leading receiver as a redshirt freshman. He was their 4th leading receiver as a sophomore, only because they started throwing it to the back a lot more. A guy by the name of Hollywood Smothers, by the way, that kind of pushed Noah Rogers down to being 4th in receptions at NC State this year. But to be a top 3 wideout at an ACC school and to be a 5-star who signed with Ohio State out of high school, I'd be excited about adding Noah Rogers to the mix. You didn't break the bank. You've saved the money for a position that's more important. And to me, for as much panic as I'm sensing out there about wide receiver Cam Coleman and running back Hollywood Smothers, I'm not panicking about that at all. But if you want to prod me into panicking, we can talk about the offensive line.
Yeah, and I think we all started this entire conversation talking about the offensive line and the importance of it. And right now, from an experience standpoint, they don't have a lot of it right now. I mean, when you look across the board, I think from a schematic fit standpoint, I've talked about that. Michael Carroll's got a little bit of it. It was great that he was able to get his feet wet this season. Will Sanders, to some extent as well, less than 200 snaps. So it's not like he played extensively, but at least got some reps with the first team where it's like, okay, that's pretty solid. But other than those two, there's not really any experience or much experience in the room. Now, even some of the guys that you've brought in, or one of the guys that you brought in currently, Caden Strayhorn, that's one where doesn't have a lot of experience. But I like the talent, just like I like the talent with a lot of these other guys. A guy like Ty Haywood, who I think Alabama is in really good position for. I think he's got some inside-out versatility. Doesn't have much experience. So you're going to have growing pains with your offensive line. Now, they are courting some guys. Quay McBroom, I think, is somebody that they're bringing in from Louisiana Monroe. Has some of that experience that you look for. Rayson Delgatti, I think is how you say it. I hope I didn't completely botch that. But the interior offensive, the interior offensive lineman from Cal Poly, that I like him, man. I really do. I think from a movement standpoint, working up to the second level, able to get guys reached as far as wide zone. I mean, he's got a lot of athleticism, can get guys blocked out in space, can do a lot, and granted, there's a step up in competition where you don't know exactly how guys are going to transition. But from an experience standpoint, I think that would be a heck of an ad for Alabama. And it gives you somebody where you have a player that we all like in Caden Strayhorn at center. You bring in a guy like this guy and you allow him to compete. He brings the experience factor. If he can get in and be competitive as far as, transitioning and stepping up in competition, I think that would be very helpful. It's also possible that Caden Strayhorn could kick out to guard. When he was 6'2", 308 pounds, like I thought he was, you can definitely make that work at guard, but you typically guard starts to be like 6'3", and really you want all your offensive line to be 6'3" or bigger, but 6'2" is fine. At center, it's a lot easier. But the fact that he's checking in a lot closer to 6'4", just a tick under 6'4", and close to 319 pounds from a size standpoint, bigger center, and then also bring some guard versatility. You get a guy like Ty Haywood, and now you've got another player who can compete at tackle. He can compete at guard, left, right, or really 4 out of the 5 spots. I can see him fitting anywhere in there. So there's going to be some concern because there's little to no experience. Even if you add some of these guys, there will be maybe 1 or 2 more that adds some experience. But it's going to have to be competition. It's going to be growing pains. It's not going to look probably perfect early next season. The fact that you've got an East Carolina in week 1, that probably helps as far as getting these guys some experience and some continuity, together. You've got to get development, though. I keep harping on that. And when you start talking about the offensive line and just the importance of that, that's got to start changing based off of what we've seen so far.
When you're going to the portal for help, Clint, I think what you need is, are you looking for starters or are you looking for depth? You have to have both. Alabama's offensive line, they need both. I mean, that's how bad the situation is. They need to go to the portal and find guys capable of coming in and starting immediately. And at the same time, you don't have enough guys. I think a minimum of offensive linemen you would need to get through a season, a minimum, is 15 scholarship-worthy guys for the 5 spots. That's just sort of even a minimum. Right now, as we're recording this live, I mean, they have 11, for next fall. That includes Caden Strayhorn. So you're 4 short just in terms of bodies. And then you look at the starters. Only Michael Carroll's a returning starter. Will Sanders has played quite a bit with the ones. You could argue he's a returning starter in the sense that he's played fairly extensively with the first team, but even that's a stretch. But that's just 2. No one else in the lineup has been even remotely close to that. And even Caden Strayhorn, the portal guy you brought in, was a redshirt guy, from Michigan last year. So the offensive line just has to be the focus for me. Now, I would say I like your comments about Racine Delgatti from Cal Poly, because I couldn't agree more. You can't just write a kid off because of where he's from. and say, okay, well, he's from Cal Poly, he's not able to help us. That's crazy. As a matter of fact, Alabama's tight end this year was one of the better players on the team. He spent his freshman year at Cal Poly. He actually spent his freshman and his redshirt freshman year at Cal Poly. I would say Josh Cuevas worked out pretty well. So you can't just write off a kid because he started his career at FCS. What you have to look for and say, does he have FBS traits? And clearly Delgado does in terms of size, some positional versatility. That doesn't mean he's going to come in and be the starter. It means that I think, Clint, he can come in and push other guys and potentially start and raise the level of play for whoever does eventually become a starter, because you can't have a situation where you kind of project, say, okay, these 5 guys are going to be the starters and the backups are so terrible, they're not really in the picture. Well, then you're not going to get great play out of the starters either. They've got to have someone pushing them to be as good as they can be. Otherwise, they wouldn't be starting. And I think this is the type kid that can do that. I think he's quality depth, very possibly. And you need that out of the portal too. So I don't want people just to focus on big names like Jacorius Peak and now Ty Haywood, who I consider a really big name. I know he's a redshirt player, but he was such a big-time prospect. He's been at Michigan, which is sort of an offensive line machine up there. I consider Ty Haywood a frontline guy and a guy that I would sort of expect to either to win a starting position or sort of become a co-starter at either tackle or guard.
It's just, and someone pointed this out to me on Twitter, and they're 100% right. We've seen enough of these guys, these smaller school players. Quinn Minertz is one, a starting interior offensive lineman for the Denver Broncos. I mean, I watched him show up to the Senior Bowl. I don't even remember when that was, probably 2019, 2020, 2021, somewhere around there. And I watched him whip everybody's ass. I mean, I keep up with it pretty much each and every year. UW Whitewater, Division III school. And he ended up, I think, being a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick. And I watched him in those one-on-ones whip everybody all week. So, I mean, you can't tell me that some of these lower rated guys, and that's not, yes, to that extent, that's kind of rare, but you can't tell me that that's not, it's actually fairly common that these guys, these smaller schools, show up for the Senior Bowl and they're very competitive and they have a lot of traits that you look for, and they end up being, more highly sought after as far as the NFL draft than you would think. So, yeah, I mean, I do think that he's got the kind of traits that you look for. He plays with an edge and some nastiness. I do think that, from what you can run with him from an athleticism standpoint, there's no limitations, high-level athlete, and he brings more size. I mean, being 6'3", I think 300 pounds, that is something where I could easily see him being like a 305, 310-pound center, maybe leaving him at 300, but I could see, beefing him up a little bit as far as transition to the SEC, and hoping that, 5 or 10 pounds probably wouldn't make much of a difference as far as his athleticism is concerned. But let's get to some of these super chats, a lot of questions. We're going to kind of, let's see, we'll skip around. I guess we'll start at the top. Sports guys, appreciate the 199 super chat. Where is all of our money going? Where's all the money going, Jimmy? Where is it? You're the money man today.
It's in 2 places. One is sitting there waiting to be spent. I would agree that Alabama probably has quite a bit of financial flexibility at the moment compared to what they normally have. But I want everyone to remember this. Alabama actually returns quite a bit of talent. They return quite a bit of talented kids that they had to pay to keep out of the portal. Correct. I think we focus too much on who's in the portal, who's not in the portal, and not enough focus on they're all free agents. The players on your team are able to go into the portal if they want to. You have to pay them not to go in the portal. So when people say we're sitting on all this money, that's probably partly true. But I'm just going to go over a few kids here that probably got substantial raises from what they were making last year to what we had to pay them this year. Austin Mack and Keelan Russell are no longer backup quarterbacks. They're starting. They're going to contend to start. Ryan Williams, believe it or not, we had to pay him more money. Why? Because people are in his DMs offering him insane amounts of money to transfer. Got to pay Ryan. Got to pay Lotzier Brooks. He was a 3-star freshman. Now he's getting 7-figure offers to leave and go other places. You got to pay Caleb Edwards. He was a true freshman starter at tight end to a degree. Michael Carroll, that's a guy you had to pay. London Simmons is a guy that probably wasn't well paid last year, probably pretty well paid this moment. You have to pay Yanze Pierre, not just not to leave, not to enter the draft. Bray Hubbard, don't just leave, don't enter the draft. Dejon Lee, Xavier Brown, Red Morgan, all pay. That's where a lot of the money went. And trust me, those are guys you just didn't want to see walk out the door. So I don't think people should assume that there's all this money out there for Alabama. But there is some. There's no question there's some. And I think they're waiting on the right guy to spend it on. Also this, everybody right now that's listening to this, I'm just going to assume something terrible. I'm going to assume that you all have $20 in your pocket. Well, you have $20 in your pocket and you might want some beer. All right. So go to the store with your $20 and get your 12 pack of Miller Lite. But if they're charging you $30 for it, don't do it. Don't do it. You can get it cheaper somewhere else. It's no different with football players. Just because they have the money in their pocket doesn't mean they should overpay for a specific player. Don't pay $100,000 for a $70,000 player. Go find a $70,000 player and give him $70,000. Don't overpay just because you have the money. Everybody listening to the show doesn't overpay for the things they need when they know they can get the same thing cheaper somewhere else. So just don't confuse having money with overpaying.
Well, I mean, and the other side of that too, or another element of that is, imagine one of the things about having to pay a quarterback on the NFL level. You know, he goes through his rookie deal, it's ready for a big time extension. You end up giving him that extension. It hurts, man. Just having a guy on a rookie contract, all of a sudden getting paid way more money. That's less money that you have to spend elsewhere. That always sucks. But one of the things on the NFL level is you probably lock that guy up for half a decade, right? Or 5 or 6 years, you know, maybe a little bit further than half a decade. And soon, you know, within a few years, that deal, which was normally astronomical, normally the quarterbacks, it's always, even guys that don't even come close to deserving it, it's always they end up having the biggest contract or they're close, and they always end up probably getting more money than they should. And now it's starting to become about guarantees, which is even more as far as financial flexibility and stuff. That becomes a problem. But a couple of years down the road, based off of the market, now you're in a position where you're in a little bit better shape, where your contract relative to other teams, now they're having to spend it on the premium talent. It's now a lot more affordable, and it makes a lot more sense. Imagine if those same quarterbacks every single year could stay with the market demand and they could continue to climb. It would break the NFL from an NFL salary cap perspective. If every single one of their players every year you had to continue, and that's what's happening right now. It's unsustainable in college football. I'm telling you right now, it doesn't matter about booster fatigue and all that stuff does matter. It 100% matters. And I think that that's 100% coming too. But just from a pure standpoint of, you can't continue this, because not only are you asking these boosters, it's like, hey, you remember the guy that you paid a lot of money for us last year to help get, well, he's now trying to get back in the portal and he now wants an extra, you know, 500,000 or an extra $1 million. Oh, and we're also trying to get this other wide receiver too, by the way, who's going to cost you a ton of money. That's tough. That's a tough sell, especially if said receiver that you paid last year wasn't super productive. Like he didn't meet the demands, and paying that amount of money, it didn't pay for what you had hoped that it would get, which is a national championship. That's what all these programs are swinging for at this point. And so while it sucks right now, it's unsustainable. It's going to pop eventually, and things will start to settle down. This is not the way it's going to be forever. I don't know what the solution is. I'm telling you, it's going to be different in 5 years, maybe 10 years. People aren't waiting around that long. I mean, they're not going to say, oh, okay, I guess we'll just deal with it. No, it could happen a lot faster than that. I'm just telling you that these have been interesting times the last several years, and it's also learning to navigate. But Alabama does have money, and they're going to try to go out there and get players they feel like can come in and help them. I don't think that it's smart to, like you said, overpay for players based off of the value that you give them. Now, if you need to come in with a really competitive offer, that's fine. But one of the things that Cody Stevens brought up in the super chats was, and I appreciate the $5 super chat, Cody. He said maybe Bama's going after players that don't just care about their bank account. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that's 100% happening in a lot of these cases. With Cam Coleman, he was going to get a very respectable financial offer. They weren't paying him more money than Texas. So if he ends up picking Alabama, it has to be a reason other than money for that to happen. Now, they were in that conversation. Were they really ever going to pull Cam Coleman? Probably not. Because there's also other factors. As you mentioned, Arch, the fact that his agent is a Texas alumni, I'm sure that doesn't hurt Texas's chances, I promise you. But like it's the whole reason that a lot of fans have been suggesting, call these guys up, make them an offer over the phone, some loose offer to let them know where you're going to be coming in so you can get them on campus and make the pitch. I have continuously pushed back against that because you are starting that relationship with numbers. You're not trying to figure out who they are as a person, how they fit into your locker room, what kind of role they're looking for. You're starting the entire conversation with numbers. And to me, while the Texas schools and some of these others, I think LSU right now probably is operating that way, they're fine with that. And I'm not saying that can't work, but like Kale DeBoer, when he was hired, what did we talk about? He's won pretty much everywhere he's been, and the culture that he builds. Coaches want to coach for him. Players want to play for him. And you start sacrificing that culture building by making money that priority. Money is going to play a factor. Guys aren't coming to play for $500K for you when they were getting $4 million offers elsewhere. It's not happening. But there has to be some level of relationship, and you have to make sure that a guy fits what you need and what you're looking for. And to me, Hollywood Smothers, to an extent, they made him a priority coming out the gate. I mean, as soon as the transfer portal opened, he was quickly connected to Alabama. They quickly got him on campus. They pretty quickly closed on him. So that told me he was a priority. The people who are arguing that it was a luxury, I would push back against that to an extent, but I will say none of us were coming out the gate with the transfer portal opening saying running back is somebody you got to go get immediately. It was not one of those positions. Wide receiver, not one of those positions. So comparing to the other spots, it was somewhat of a luxury. And if you can't get a Jacarius Peak and stuff and really upgrade your offensive line from that standpoint, and you do have some of this money, okay, you can now turn your attention and say, well, we might not improve the offensive line to the extent that we wanted to, adding a surefire, bona fide starter, all-American caliber player on the offensive line, but we can make our wide receiver room so stupid good that it compensates for some of that. You see what I'm saying? So the fact that you are not going to have to spend what they were offering Cam Coleman, which they were offering him a very, very respectable amount of money compared to Texas. They were. That is now a lot of money that can be spent elsewhere because you didn't get him. And you had figured out a way to have that money to be able to pay him and be competitive. Now you can go spend it elsewhere. Let's see what they do with that money. And no, it might not go to one specific guy right there at the top of these transfer portal rankings. That's the guy that you can point to as far as leading your class. But it could pay for 2 or 3 or 4 very strong, very quality starters that you wouldn't have been able to get in on had you gotten Cam Coleman because you had allotted all that money to him. So there's different ways of looking at this, Jimmy.
Yeah, and Cody makes a good point with this question. This is why about, players that don't just care about their bank account. My experience, players that care about absolutely nothing at all but money are not going to be the type of players that win the game for you in the fourth quarter. Right. Because they're concerned about other things. But money is important. Money's important to everyone listening to this show. Everyone that works for a living, money is important to you. And if you're not working, you find out that money is even more important to you than you thought. So I don't criticize these kids for putting money at the top or near the top when it comes to making these decisions. But he makes a good point, and this is it, about not get, like, for instance, Alabama's staff was criticized a little bit for not getting Jacarius Peak on campus, before he decided to go to NC State. And look, you've got to meet with these kids before you can give them a formalized offer. And if you don't believe me, let me tell you guys what happens at the Senior Bowl in Mobile before NFL teams ever promise any of these guys their money from their owners. They go down to the Senior Bowl and they not only watch them do the drills like Clint was talking about earlier that you can see on TV, they meet with them. There's literally meetings. They meet with all the players. Each of the 32 teams takes time to meet with players. Then they go to Indianapolis at the Combine in February, and they do it again. All the teams meet with all the players. They want to meet them. Then they go to pro days and spend even more time with them. Don't y'all remember the famous owners taking our guys out to dinner and all that stuff? Do you know why they're doing that? They're getting to know them before they decide to invest a lot of money in them. They want to know them as people. What are your motivations? What are you like? What kind of personality do you have? How are you going to fit in our locker room? That's why you've got to meet with these kids and get to know them. You can't just get them on the phone and promise them a bunch of money and you've never met them. The NFL doesn't do that.
Right.
The NFL meets with them multiple times before they make an investment. You'd be crazy at the college level to do it with 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. You've got to meet them and know them before you invest all your money in them. Because in college, Clint, it's worse than the NFL. College has a cap, that rev share cap. If you invest money in a kid and he's not good, it's probably only going to cost you for a year, but you're dead. You've got dead money. You've got money that's not helping you be a good football team. That money's dead. The NFL, they invest in somebody, he shows up and he's not good. You know what they do? They just go get another kid. Can't do that in college football. Got to wait a whole nother year to get rid of this kid and go get another one. You can't do it right away like you can in the NFL, where there's this endless pool of free agents to go try out. But
that's
just saying, you got to meet the kids before you invest the money in them to find out what their motivations are.
Well, and to your point, look, Alabama's not going to be Texas as much as everybody wants them to be Texas. They don't have those kind of deep pockets. They don't. Doesn't mean they can't be competitive when the player and the evaluation is right. But here's what I'll say: Alabama can't afford to miss. Texas can. Texas can go out there and they can get Emmett Mosley and spend a lot of money on him and bring him in and get 400 yards and 3 touchdowns out of him. They can have Isaiah Bond go for 540 yards and 5 touchdowns. They can have Amari Nablack have 5 catches for 33 yards. Matthew Golden, who did end up being super productive. They have had some pretty productive receivers, not 1,000-yard receivers. None of these transfers have touched the 1,000-yard mark. But I would say Matthew Golden, he ends up going in the first round. He had close to 1,000 yards, came up 13 short, and 9 touchdowns. That's a hit. But Silas Bolden, Isaiah Nayer, Jaleel Billingsley, Ajayi Hall. They also had A.D. Mitchell, who was another one of those players who was pretty productive and ended up being, I think, a second-round draft pick. So my point in saying all this is they can – I just mentioned, 2 on there that they really got their money's worth, and they spent an absolute premium out of probably, 7, 8, 9 guys. They can afford to miss all they want. That money's not drying up over there. But you're trying to go to boosters at Alabama, and you're pulling things together because I don't think a lot of they have different strategies than Texas. But when you can finally get up enough money to be able to pay one of these guys, the last thing you want to do is, hey, go hand somebody tons of money because you finally got the funds to make that happen, and then that guy be a huge whiff. Good luck going back for that money because it's not an endless stream. So while they can be competitive, they also have to approach things a lot more cautiously and intelligently. And so that's going to be a different approach. That's going to lead to you missing out on some guys. I mean, who are all these big? I mean, Hollywood Smothers, Texas. Cam Coleman, Texas. Where is Isaiah Horton going? Texas A&M. Where did a lot of the big name receivers last year go? Texas A&M. Texas Tech is swinging for the fences in the transfer portal. These Texas schools that have the endless money, they have a crazy advantage right now. They're not the only ones, but they have a crazy advantage right now. There's no other way around that. Alabama could make it work for Cam Coleman because they probably believe this is as surefire as it gets, as far as if we end up spending this premium on this guy, he's going to hit and be a really good player in our system and a really good player for us, but you got to have these hits. And so they're going to be more selective as far as going for the guys at the top. But I mean, who beat Texas? Kale DeBoer at Washington to get to the national championship. He beat all this talent that we're talking about that Texas has. And he did it with guys who didn't even rank even close from a high school talent perspective. And from a transfer portals perspective, you bring in Michael Penix Jr., you bring in Dylan Johnson, good players, but were they the elite of the elite? Absolutely not. They weren't. And this staff turned them into NFL caliber, high-end NFL caliber talent. That's what he was brought to Alabama to do. in this new NIL transfer portal era, it's going to be different. You probably can't win by just going out there and get Nick Saban won a lot. He's the greatest coach of all time, greatest as far as, managing things and running things, but he also just had substantially more talent than everybody else. And I think he did a great job of developing. I'm not trying to take away from that. I'm saying if you're not a Nick Saban caliber type of guy and operator, you've got to have somebody that can develop the talent that you get on your roster. That's also going to lead to you probably not having as much talent from a star's perspective as not only that you're used to, but also relative to some others. That's just part of it. But to me, that doesn't mean, let's everybody panic and everything's over. We've seen Kale DeBoer win against the Oregons, win against the Texases. We've seen him do this enough where let's just see how things turn out. We're going to continue to cover the transfer portal. Obviously, every one of these moves, they matter. Alabama does have a lot more money, but I don't think people, while it's disappointing, there's no doubt about it. While I look at a lot of these guys and I can see the vision, see how they could help, I think the biggest problem that Alabama has right now is that fans, a year ago, when we're talking about development and all those things, the fans trusted the development. So I feel like this message would be easier to sell. Based off of what we saw, you didn't see the development that you needed at some pretty key spots. So that trust has been, tarnished a little bit. They've got to repair it, but I still believe in this staff's ability to do that. I do think probably some changes need to be made as far as the staff is concerned, but I still believe in Kale DeBoer and what he was brought in to do at Alabama.
Sorry, a little technical thing. I think people are too down on some of the returning players. I mean, in terms of looking forward to next year, and they think that the transfer portal has to save the starting lineup. I don't look at that at all. I think some of these guys that are coming back are better players than many think. I don't think you need the transfer portal to dramatically alter the lineup that you think you're going to put on the field against East Carolina. But you do have to add some guys. And again, I'm not going to harp on the offensive line to death on the whole show, but I think that's the key area where you do need some new guys and even some new depth. But other positions, like I'll give you an example, inside linebacker, you lose 3 inside linebackers and you think, well, gosh, we've got to go to the portal. And they did. They went and got Caleb Woodson, who I think has a really good chance of being out there against East Carolina as a starter, a good chance. But I'm pretty high on Caden Jones. I think Caden Jones is ready. I know we haven't seen him play in the games with the ones in any substantial number of snaps, but he's a guy that I think is a good example of he's on the team. Not a lot of people talk about him. I think he's ready to be a starter. I think other guys might prove that they're ready to be starters in the spring. Guys like QB Reese, maybe a guy named like Luke Metz. These are people we don't even talk about. But I think they have a legit chance of proving this spring that they're ready to start. There's players at other positions, like, for instance, the defensive line, London Simmons. I mean, I couldn't be any higher on that guy. I won't be shocked at all if London Simmons is actually a more productive player from a tackles, TFL, sacks than even Tim Keenan was. And I think the world of Keenan. Keenan's about to be an NFL football player. But I think London Simmons might even be more productive than Tim Keenan. Caleb Tompkins, a guy got out of the transfer portal, might be more productive than James Smith. Won't surprise me at all. I think he's going to slide into James Smith's role and be more productive. I'm just saying I don't think that we have to look to the transfer portal to save next season. I trust a lot of what's on campus right now, and the key is going to be developing them in the spring, in the summer, and the fall, as Clint said. But overall, I really don't think the roster is in terrible shape. You just need some patches here and there, with the glaring exception of the offensive line.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let's move on with the super chats. Allie Crolison, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Can we even fix the offensive line? We go get another one. Another team will just outbid us. Who's to say we are going to get Ty Haywood? We get chain snatched again. Sorry, that was tough. I mean, I don't know. I will say you just had a ton of money come available, and something that Shannon Terry with On3 he just posted. If it's true that he feels like that Texas probably paid Cam Coleman $3 to $3.5 million. I thought it was going to be closer to 2 to 2.5. I don't know how close Alabama came to 3 to 3.5. I have no idea. But
why would you?
Yeah,
Why would you?
yeah.
So I mean, it's overpaying if you ask me.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you got to think from the Texas perspective, they're trying to go all in. This season was a disappointment. Alabama's season was a disappointment probably to some Alabama fans, but when you actually get to the bare bones of it and what they achieved, it probably wasn't a disappointment. It's how it looked more so than results. For Texas, this was expected to be their year. Like they finally were getting to move on to Arch. He had sat for a couple of years. He had gotten his feet wet with some experience. He had kind of gotten the Mac Jones treatment, in 2024, where he got his feet wet and got to start some games and looked really good. He was being hyped as a Heisman favorite and all these things. They were one of the top two, probably preseason teams, 2 or 3 preseason teams going into the season, and they didn't even make the college football playoff. Steve Sarkisian's probably feeling that pressure. Texas is not going to deal with that forever. So, and granted, like I said, that money doesn't run dry over in Texas. So I don't think there's ever a situation where he can't pay players. Those Texas boosters, they're going to continue to hand over the money to try to see if they can get it right, because that money at this point, it's seemingly endless. But he's got to have better results, so he's doing whatever he can. He's trying to stack the talent. I get it, but Alabama, yeah. Now that I'm seeing the actual numbers, and maybe I was foolish for thinking it was 2 to 2.5, but 3 to 3.5, that's way more than I would have thought. And would Alabama have come close to that? Probably not, if I had to guess. But whatever they were offering, which I'm sure was a very respectable number, especially relative to what Alabama would typically pay, they're now going to have that money to spend elsewhere. And you can continue to say, they're getting stuffed in a locker by all these places, but Hollywood Smothers was going to get a nice NIL chunk. Cam Coleman was going to get a nice NIL chunk. Now it's more so you've got quite a bit of money to play with and spend. Let's see what they do with it before we freak out.
Yeah, you're not going to pay – if you're Alabama, you're not going to pay Cam Coleman gigantically more than you pay Ryan Williams and Latsier Brooks, in terms of what that would do to the locker room, for one thing. That's what I mean by overpaying. Overpaying just leads to any enormous amount of set of problems. But I do think we ought to touch on this. I'm going to really delve into it. I'm just going to encourage everyone out there listening that's interested in this topic to read Ross Dellinger on Twitter. Ross knows RevShare and NIL better than any media member out there. He knows that, knows how it works, and reports on it better than anyone else. And Ross has reported this week really interesting stuff that it appears that some schools out there, and he doesn't name names, but I think some of the names are apparent, and I think we've discussed them on this show to some extent. Some schools appear to be violating the nature of what's allowed in terms of NIL under the current rules. And the CSC, which is the College Sports Commission, which has been formed to police this, the CSC is launching investigations, and schools will hear from them this week. That's according to Ross Dellinger. Who knows what the end result's going to be? I'm not going to sit here and promise end results. I don't know that anyone's done anything wrong. I just know the CSC believes maybe someone out there is doing something in violation of the rules, and they're going to launch the investigations. This is not the NCAA. This is more of a private group. And I think until there's actually results, we ought to trust that they're going to investigate and make sure the rules are being enforced properly as it relates to the new rules, as it relates to NIL. But Ross Dellinger explains it better than I can, and in more detail. And you can read his work. Just find him on Twitter, Ross Dellinger, and his stories are usually free because they're on Yahoo. And he'll further explain that. But these investigations will start this week. Could result in some of these contracts these kids sign and being ruled null and void, or it could result in a loss of eligibility for some of these players potentially.
Yeah, granted, it still remains to be seen. I got to see it, but that is definitely something to monitor if you're a fan. We're going to start working our way through these pretty quickly. I know that we get long-winded, but Squid Art Online, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. He says, I'm more upset that we couldn't nab Timothy Lewis. those heavy hands, experience at left tackle, and could play guard right away and help with the pin and pull game. I mean, I don't disagree. I think there was a lot of inconsistency to Jimothy Lewis's game. A lot. Do I think he could have helped Alabama? Do I think he has upside and talent? Absolutely. But I think that there's enough inconsistency where he was no sure thing. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, couldn't nab, I don't think is the right way to put that. I don't know that Alabama was pushing to get Jimothy Lewis. And had they probably would have him right now. So this coaching staff, they did their evaluation. They knew exactly what they, could have if they were to press, and they elected not to press. And you can disagree with that and say, I like the talent, and I think that's a miss. You can do that all day, but this is not one where Cal stuffed Alabama in a locker. That did not happen. I think they knew that something was going on with Ty Haywood. They liked the positional flexibility that he brought to the table. They thought there was more upside with him. And it's been a couple of years for Jimothy Lewis, and you've gotten very inconsistent play. Didn't make the kind of growth that I thought he would, going from a true freshman to a redshirt freshman. And so maybe there's some concern that will continue to be an issue, and Alabama cannot afford any inconsistency, or it needs to limit the amount of inconsistency that it has on its offensive line. No doubt about it. Still could get some from Ty Haywood, but I think, there's still upside there considering the talent stuff. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't have anything really to add. Clint handled that well. I would just say they didn't lose out, like Clint said. Well, they didn't lose out on Jimothy Lewis. They decided not to pursue him further. That was a decision Alabama made after their evaluation was complete, including meeting him in person, and then decided to go in another direction. It wasn't a situation of Cal beating Alabama for him.
Yeah, and just to wrap that up, it's not that Alabama said, no, we're not interested anymore. They slow played it. They were just like, we want to see where some of this other stuff works out. And if we lose him as a result, we're completely fine with that. I think that was more of the approach. Trent Derrick, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Can y'all give us some insight on our money NIL situation? How do we not have the money to compete after some of you guys left? Jimmy, do you have anything else you want to add? Because I feel like we've already covered that, pretty extensively. But if you have anything else, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, yes, I agree that there is some money there. For instance, they made a significant offer to Cam Coleman. They made a significant offer to Hollywood Smothers. Those offers weren't taken. So there is money there. That's absolutely true. And they're looking at who to spend it on wisely. Just because they have the money doesn't mean that they're going to start overpaying for kids. They're going to pay what they think a kid is worth, and they're not going to overpay. And secondly, I want to reiterate that a lot of the money was already spent on retention. A lot of players on the team that were already on the team had to get significant raises. I know that we look to the transfer portal and say, okay, how much are you going to spend on this guy? How much are you going to spend on this guy? Alabama returned around 50 kids on the team that are back and are going to play for Alabama next fall. Most of them got raises. Some of them got substantial raises. The Zabian Browns, the Dijon Lees. What do y'all think it costs to keep Bray Hubbard and Yanze Pierre out of the draft? So a lot of this extra money, or this year's money, went to retention of what they currently had, and isn't just free to spend on the free agents that are actually in the portal.
Good stuff. All right, we got Garrett Gaskin. Appreciate the $19.99 super chat. Appreciate you as always as far as your support. Hey, fellas, I try to keep my thoughts as level-headed as possible. I'm disappointed just like the rest of the fan base. We're adding depth and looking for starters. Give me an FCS guy who wants to take souls. God bless, fellas. I mean, I understand that there's always going to be this question as far as competition. We had this conversation or this debate when it comes to high school players. If they come from a lower level of high school competition, you don't always know exactly how it's going to translate. But you look for the traits, and then you trust your staff's ability to get the most out of those traits. And sometimes it will take time. But as like Josh Cuevas, he didn't step on Washington's campus and immediately become the guy he was for Alabama the last couple of years. It might have taken them a little bit of time. Now, granted, they had some talent in front of him as well. That ended up playing a part, but there could have been some transition happening there. It could have taken him a little bit of time to adjust. And the fact that he did have the Washington kind of buffer where you step up to Washington, that was Pac-10 football back then, which is, was still quality football, definitely a step up. Obviously, they did some really good things as far as getting to the national championship, but maybe him, having that buffer and time to adjust and acclimate prior to getting to Alabama, maybe that ended up helping him. But I still think that there's some diamonds in the rough here as far as the lower levels. Go find them. it's the players that you're looking at. The Quinn Minertzes is what I'm talking about. That's just the example I've used, and I hope I'm saying his last name right. I know how to spell it. I haven't said it too many times in my life, to be honest with you. But I watched him. I watched him a lot at those Senior Bowls. And that's a guy who could have been a very, very high-level starter for an SEC program. I mean, he's the starter for the Denver Broncos. I mean, and he's got that center guard versatility. I mean, he could have been a really good player. He didn't have the option to climb back then, as far as, getting up in levels and things like that. So I agree, and that's more of the deeper dives. And there also, we have to remember, there's a very respectable, very intriguing high school class as well that is going to be involved in this, that you might end up with. This staff is not afraid to play freshmen. So some of these guys, whether we like it or not, or whether you are I hate going into the season banking on, freshmen, but you're probably going to get quite a bit of that. And while that could create some growing pains, it could also create a situation by the back half of next season, as those guys starting to get more comfortable, you're ready to rock and roll. Get anything else, Dad?
Yes, to Garrett's comment, let's remember this. Sometimes there's selective memory or selective perception with Garrett's point about the FCS guys who want to show up and they're really motivated to prove they're worthy. That's true, but think about the NFL draft. How many FCS guys are taken in a normal NFL draft? I wish I could just spit out the answer to that, but I'm going to go with something like 20, in 7 rounds, maybe 20 guys out of a total of 260 that are drafted. I'm going to say maybe 20 come from the FCS level. And if I'm wrong, it might be more like 10. And that might even be a better answer than 20. Point being, if Alabama's going to go to FCS to recruit players out of FCS to play for you, if you get those 20, you're in good shape. You're really good. You've improved your team. But if you just go sign, let's just say 30 players from Wofford, you know what you are? Wofford. That's what you are.
So you're saying Auburn's USF?
I am saying Auburn is going to be USF largely. No, you can't depend on FCS guys to be. It's all about evaluation. There are guys at that level that can help you. The key is go get Wofford's best player. Go get Cal Poly's best player. They'll have like one guy that's probably good enough to play in the SEC. But any sort of wholesale, there's so many kids down there that are so good, that the NFL draft sort of proves that that's not the case. That there are a few, and it's worth looking around. It's worth poking around down there. But you can't sign them wholesale, even if they have a lot of want to. They're just simply not talented enough. That's why most of them are there in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. All right, the press box. Appreciate the $4.99 super chat. No, but I would overpay for the things we need. They need OL. Yeah, but there's only so many. I'm telling you, that's very, very limited. And once again, they never had a chance to pitch a guy like Jacarius Peak. I mean, they didn't. And a guy like Lance Hurd, I don't think he's fitting into your locker room. I don't think he's what you want from that standpoint. I really don't. And there's been reports of a little bit of laziness. I don't know how true that is, but I'm telling you, like a lot of the guys at the top, A, there's very few of them, and B, you can't spend on things when you never get the opportunity to spend. So they weren't even given that opportunity. So they've got to take what is available, and I do think that they'll go get some impactful players for themselves. J5, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Do you think Bama could go after Mandrell Desaire from Florida State? So he's the one with the twin brother, right?
Yeah, there's two brothers, and I think they're kind of young.
Yeah. So I mean, granted, I don't know. If this is the story and the people I'm thinking of, I want to say I think they've very much frustrated Florida State with some of their approaches to negotiating things. I think they've created some headaches. So I don't know if that would be the case. Granted, know very limited about them, so I can't really speculate too much there.
I've heard Alabama's name associated with them. That doesn't mean it won't get to that point, but to this point, I have not heard Alabama's name associated with those guys. Yeah,
same. All right, Iceman, appreciate the $2 super chat. Any chance Justice Haynes might come back? Jimmy, I don't know about you, but doubtful to me. I just feel like at this point, especially based off of what it's being reported that he's being offered, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, I think Justice Haynes is a good talent. I mean, he's based off of what they're saying. Some schools offering him, and the report, the rumors are Georgia Tech, but I don't know for sure. But I mean, it's a couple of million, and no, you're not paying that to a running back when you've got guys like EJ Crowell and things like that. When you've got all these other needs, they were paying, I'm sure, Hollywood Smothers a very respectable amount. But you got anything else to add about Justice Haynes?
I think in part Justice Haynes left because of Alabama's offense and the scheme. I don't think he's going to come back to play in the same offense with the same coaches. I think that's why he left in the first place. I also think, like Clint said, in terms of the price, seemed kind of crazy. But Georgia Tech seems like a good fit. That's going home for him. My expectation is that he chooses Georgia Tech. But I don't think even if Alabama opened the door, I don't think he would walk through it. I don't believe so because he walked out the last time.
Yeah, I agree. Dontario Moore, appreciate the $1.99 super chat. Getting Haywood is a win because he was in need. They haven't got him yet, but it is trending. Alabama, I think, is in good position, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you I do think he would help. I don't like the fact that he didn't have experience. I'll be honest about that. I would 10-1 rather him, have been a guy who, started a handful of games this year, got his feet wet, and he did. But he had 3 games, I think, is what he played in on offense, and had 15 snaps, so just played very little. And that's going to mean he's going to be a redshirt freshman, if I'm not mistaken. But with 4 years of eligibility, and he's got some positional flexibility, and I think that really helps. And so everybody thinks he's coming in, he's going to automatically be your left tackle. I think he can compete at left tackle, but it's also possible that if Jackson Lloyd ends up being that dude, he could kick over to right tackle. You can move Michael Carroll inside. Maybe Ty Haywood ends up being one of your guards. I think 6'5", 316 pounds, got a little bit of a bully personality in the way that he plays. I could totally see him kind of getting into the mix on the interior as well. So don't automatically assume it's going to be a tackle, but this is one of those guys where he gives you another tackle option where it's not like Olasolinen or, Casey Poe, where it's like, I don't really like him at tackle, but you really don't have a choice. He could actually be a good player at tackle as well. Do you have anything on Ty Haywood?
Yeah, I agree with you that him not having experience is a bit of gives me pause about Ty Haywood because he's not a starter somewhere else. But with his talent and Jackson Lloyd's talent, the way I sort of look at it is I'm not sure Ty Haywood's going to be ready. I'm not sure Jackson Lloyd's going to be ready. But give me both of them, and maybe one of them will be. Right. Maybe one of them will be. The chances are better that one of the two will be ready than both of them, right? So I think bring him in, have him compete with Jackson Lloyd, have him compete for those guard spots. You're just when you improve the overall competition, you improve the chances you're putting somebody on the field that's ready.
That's 100% correct. Absolutely. The White Wolf, appreciate the $5 super chat. So who are they going to get that's going to make an immediate impact without spending money? First of all, we're not saying don't spend money. I don't think, Jimmy, have you said that? I don't think I've said that.
They are spending. They are spending. Hollywood Smothers was not cheap the first time around at all. Just because you got sort of outbid by Texas means nothing. Alabama spends considerable money. I know you'll get some blowback from me, Alabama, about that. I mean, Alabama's got max rev share. They spend max rev share, and they spend every bit in NIL that they believe they're allowed to spend under the rules.
Correct.
Other people are bending that, and they'll have to answer to the CSC about it, apparently coming up. But Alabama is not cheap, and they just believe in not overpaying specific players.
100%. Completely agree. Cody Stevens, appreciate the $10 super chat. Don't know if it would have been a solution, but it would have been better with NIL if the players were paid for how they perform and not promised $2 million beforehand, just not to perform. You know whose approach that was, Cody? Nick Saban's. And I mean, Bryce Young, it's like, hey, this is the guy who's been around. We've seen him. We've worked with him. And he was the first 7-figure NIL player, if I recall correctly. And granted, he had not started for Alabama, but there's something to be said as far as being expected to be Alabama's starting quarterback, not paying a kid who, bringing him in and not taking a shot at him at all. In fact, I don't even want to use – we'll use Deuce Knight as an example because that's easier. I don't mind offending Deuce Knight, to be honest with you. But, you bring him in, and was he brought in to be your immediate starter? No. You also paid Jackson Arnold. You brought in Ashton Daniels, but yet you paid a kid because he's a very highly rated recruit a ton of money to come be your third-string quarterback for a majority of the season. Like, that's one of those things where Nick Saban didn't believe in that. He believed in, hey, you come here, we're going to develop you, we're going to prepare you for the NFL, and when you are ready and you have proven it, and we feel confident that you deserve X amount of money, you'll get paid X amount of money. That was his approach. It's harder to do now, which I think a lot of that might be why Nick Saban's no longer doing it. He didn't like the fact that we're going to go promise a mess ton of money to a bunch of guys who haven't earned it. And then your guys who have earned it that are already on campus, they're like, wait a minute, hold up. People are reporting that this cat's making, X amount of money and stuff. And where's mine at? I mean, I'm out here catching, 50 balls for 800 yards for you this year. Where's my piece of the pie? So yeah, I completely agree there. Kick Bama MIA, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Who thinks DeBoer has the program headed in the right direction? Who thinks he's established a good culture? Who thinks they'll fix the offensive line / run game? Jimmy, do you believe any of that?
Jury's still out. Jury's still out. We this will be probably the subject Clint and I discuss the entirety of the offseason. Is Alabama heading in the right direction? I think there's a ton of evidence that they are. And then there are reasonable questions, very reasonable questions about it. I've got to see more of a sample size than what I've seen so far. I believe, again, it's sort of your perception. Just finished top eight. Just now. Just won the SEC regular season. Was the number 1 seed in the SEC championship. I'm not going to go over all the things they accomplished, but there's plenty of evidence that they are. Yeah. There's also some very fair questions, and today is sort of a dark day, and it's going to cloud up. People are sad about or mad about Cam Coleman and the Hollywood Smothers. It's not a great day, I think, to ask the question because it's a bigger picture question. But to me, I'll be honest, jury's still out for me.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say is that a lot of fans right now, they're feeling disappointment today. They're disappointed in what has transpired, and you got people like me that might be making them feel like you don't have a right to feel that way. And I don't want people to feel that way. Like, that's not what I'm trying to tell you. I'm trying to tell you that I think there's still light at the end of this tunnel. I don't think it's hopeless by any means. I haven't even come close to reaching hopeless or they're screwed and they're going. I'm saying that there are some concerns. There are some things that need to be addressed. I don't think Kale DeBoer has reached a point where he's got the Nick Saban trust. We're just, hey, whatever happens, we know guys got us. Kale DeBoer hadn't reached that point. And there was such a level of trust there for 2 decades where it's hard. Because, and that was always going to happen no matter who followed. I still think that when you start talking about Kale DeBoer and kind of his upside relative to a lot of these other coaches, and Jimmy, I brought this up yesterday, Steve Sarkisian fell short of expectations this year. Kirby Smart's 0-2 in the college football playoffs since winning back-to-back national championships. And he also lost to a team that didn't have his head coach, and he lost 23-10, multiple scores to Notre Dame in which he was losing 20-3 at halftime. Guys like Dan Lanning, 2-2 in the playoffs, and have got blown out by Ohio State, being in the number 1 overall seed. Yeah, you got there. You were the number 1 overall seed, but you got blown out by Ohio State. You got blown out by Indiana and completely embarrassed. So there's some blemishes there too. Kale DeBoer relative to all these guys, I'm not saying he's necessarily, he's right there with them, but I would say it is very, very close. And really, I think there are some arguments to be made for Kale DeBoer. So while the jury is still out, as Jimmy put it, I also think we need to be careful and at least acknowledge that there's still a lot of upside. There's a reason that 2 very prominent programs were pursuing Kale DeBoer so heavily this offseason, and I feel like people already forget that. Brandon from D.C., appreciate the $9.99 super chat. The money is important, but not the main thing. Indiana in 2025, Ohio State in 2024, Michigan in 2023 were comprised of quality transfers, but their base was from development. Texas A&M, and Texas Tech has money but no trophies. I think he completely nails it, Jimmy.
He did. I think Brandon hit that completely out of the park. And look, you're going to emphasize either high school recruiting or the portal. You can't emphasize all of it because there's a hard cap. There's only so much money to go around. And I think right now it's easy for people to say Alabama needs to emphasize the portal more because we're right in the middle of portal season and it's not going great. It's easy to forget that in the last 2 years, Alabama has signed the number 4 recruiting class and the number 3 recruiting class. That's awesome work. That's incredible work. And I think if Alabama emphasized the portal during high school recruiting season, the same people complaining would be back complaining, going, we're not signing enough high school players. Go ask, the Ole Miss fans about Lane's, high school recruiting.
Good point.
So he made that was a super point, and it's so true. I'm a big believer that Alabama's doing it right in terms of emphasizing high school recruiting and developing that talent. And if you think, oh, well, that talent's just walking out the door. No, it's not. Zabian, Dijon, Bray, Yanze Pierre, Justin Hill, London Simmons, Ryan Williams, Latsier Brooks, Keelan Russell, EJ Crowell. Y'all want to just give those guys back because you signed them out of high school? Not me. I think Alabama's doing a really good job of emphasizing what they're emphasizing.
Yeah, I mean, and Jalen Mbakwe was given opportunities. He really was. He was there for multiple years. He wasn't a one and done player. He almost was a one and done player, but Alabama figured out a way to get him back. They paid him money. They did what everybody wanted him to. Keon Keeley, multiple years in the system. Quay Rusall, multiple years in the system. James Smith, multiple years in the system. They knew what they had from him. And granted, they could continue to improve, but a lot of people don't realize a lot of these guys really aren't being as heavily pursued by Alabama once they want to enter the transfer portal. And I think there's a reason for that. So good point. Stacy Blackwood, appreciate you, brother, for being here. Appreciate the $5 super chat. Just wanted to say the world is not crumbling below our feet and Bama is going to be fine. RTR, completely agree. William Fuller, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Do y'all have a watch list of players that may still enter the portal? Anyone we have in the portal or considering the draft that may return? Yes, Bray Hubbard, Keon Sabb. There's, a few players that could still end up coming back. We're still waiting on decisions. As far as a list of players who may still enter the transfer portal, personally, yes, because I'm a psychopath. And despite not having any leads as far as guys who may potentially enter, I just went and would look at some of these key positions and everything else. So, Jimmy, you got anything else on that?
No, just that I believe that all the Alabama juniors that are going to enter the draft early have already made those announcements, and I'm optimistic that players like Hubbard, Sabb, Yanze Pierre are all returning to Alabama. When they make it official that they're returning to Alabama, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple more Alabama players entered the portal before next Friday. That's not going to surprise me one bit, but I do think that the juniors that have yet to make an announcement are coming back. I'm optimistic and believe in that.
Yeah. Eddie Wesley, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Enjoy your show, guys. Where did the big O lineman from LSU that visited us commit? I don't think he's committed anywhere. I think Alabama's still in the mix there, but at the same time, I also think that Racing Del Gotti is one that they're also looking at as far as a potential experienced interior option. Hunter Cheney, appreciate the $2 super chat. Bama doesn't have FU money. Texas does. True. At this point, that's just, like I said, they can take swings for the fences and they have no repercussions or any problems if they miss. Alabama can't play that game. I'm sorry they can't play that game. It's the reality. That's something that people need to come to grips with. So that just is what it is. Alabama's going to have to be smarter about how they go about this process. And then Roger Haney, appreciate the $5 super chat. Can we talk about special teams? It's a problem and needs to be addressed. Is there any discussion of a coaching change here? Yes, Jimmy, I think there has been, but go ahead with your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's something that's could very conceivably happen. I can't sit here and tell you that it is because, I don't get included in those meetings, but I do think there's a good chance. As a matter of fact, I heard recently that the current special teams coach, his contract has expired. So for him to stay on, it would have to be renewed. So let's see if that happens.
Yeah, great point. All right, that's going to do it. I know we kind of rushed through those at the end, but we've already been on here for over an hour. I'll definitely be back if anything big breaks, and also we'll continue on trucking along. Jimmy and I won't be going together tomorrow, but I'll be back on here taking questions and answering comments, and we'll continue to run with this thing. This is far from over. There's a lot going on. Still about a week left. Well, a little under a week left in the transfer portal. So we'll be covering everything. Appreciate everybody for being here. No doubt about it. You guys have been absolutely great pretty much from the jump, and I understand there's frustration. We'll continue to work through this stuff together. Get on over to rowback.com. Use the promo code Crimson20 to get 20% off your order, and we will talk to you guys soon.